Building a visually appealing and interactive navbar is probably one of the most important sections of any web page. It pretty much builds the foundation of any website, web app, or landing page. And Bubble allows us to design really nice interactive and responsive navbars for any app that you might be building. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to create a nice and simple navbar using Bubble that pretty much anyone can learn how to do. So make sure you follow along in this tutorial. It's going to be nice and simple. It's not going to be too difficult. So if you are just starting off using Bubble, this is going to be a really good place to start to learn how to design a navbar and really understand the structure of how you would design something like this. And if you're already familiar with Bubble, this could be very beneficial for you as well, as a lot of people actually don't design their navbar the correct way. So after watching this tutorial, you'll know exactly how to design your navbar to cater towards whatever it is that you're building. So let's get into it. Alright, so I've just opened up just a test tutorial application inside Bubble. So make sure you open up one. If you already have an existing one, you can open that and then start to create your navbar from there. If you're new to Bubble and you haven't created a project yet, just select to create a new one. And you can just call it whatever you like. So you're first going to get to the index page. Now on the index page, I want you to make sure you double click on that, go to layout. And what you want to do with layout is make sure it's a column layout. And also for default builder width, put it as 1400, which is just the standard size that usually people would build a web app or website in. So make sure you change those two things first, and you can just close that window there. Now, what you want to do is you're not actually going to do anything in the index page. You're going to do it into a section called reusable elements. So you're going to click on this drop down just here, and you're going to go to add a new reusable element. This will allow us to create a navigation bar inside that specific area. So click on that. You can call it just navbar or whatever you want to call it. Clone from, now this is where you can actually clone or copy from another reusable element you've previously created. For this tutorial, we're not going to do that. We're just going to create it completely new from scratch. So just call it whatever you want to name it and then just hit create. All right, once that's created, you will see that it's going to come up in just a little small square here. So the first thing we want to do is actually change the layout of this navbar to make sure it stretches throughout the whole screen and obviously is the size that we want it to be. So double click on the navbar. Now we're going to go to the type of element we want. We actually want to change it to floating group. Now what a floating group is, if you're not familiar with that, is essentially it's something that will stay on the page even as you scroll down the page. So that's what we want to do with a navbar. If you don't want to do that, that's up to you. But a lot of the these days the designs that people do is having it as a floating group. So no matter where you are on the page, the navbar will always show up at the top. So we're going to change that to floating group. You can leave the rest of the stuff as they are there. For the layout, we're going to go to column. And we're going to change the width to 1400 to match the actual size of the screen that we set before. And then the height, we're going to do 80. 80 is the standard size for pretty much all navigation bars. So we're going to make sure we put it as that size there so we can build it accordingly. Now we can leave the alignment as it is. We're going to change that later. So for now, leave it as that is. Because what we're going to do is we're actually going to put another group inside this navbar floating group. And then we're going to put in all of our elements in there. So if you just go to the appearance tab and you scroll down to where it says define each border independently, just select that one. And then for the bottom, so border style bottom, just select solid, keep the width as is, and then set whatever color you want. Usually you want this to be a nice light color. I've already got some selected colors here already. So I'm just going to select from this one, but you can obviously set up whatever you prefer. This is just a purely just design preference. So again, it's up to you what you would like to do there. All right, so once you've set this out, so this is now the, I guess if you want to say the base of our navbar. What you want to now do is, I'm just going to move this out of the way. So you want to go to grab another group. So just select that, and then you just want to click and drag across the whole thing. It'll auto snap and align itself. We're going to change that now. All right, so the first thing we want to do is to align this group the way that we want it to be. So go to layout tab and you're going to change it to a row container because we're going to have things going across, which is why we set it as a row. If we wanted things under each other, that's how you set it as a column. That's why you would set it as a column. Leave the alignment like this for now. We are going to change it in a few minutes, but for now we'll just leave the alignment as it is. Now we're going to remove the fixed width and the minimum width, because we are going to fit it to obviously how the content is set in this navbar. Now we're going to also make this element a fixed height. And we're going to change it to 80 again to be consistent with our actual navigation bar height standard. So we're going to make that as 80 pixels. And then for padding, what we're going to do is we're going to do 32 padding left and right. Now this is kind of the industry standard for desktop and laptop views. And then what we're going to do is actually change that padding when we're on a mobile view, because the standard mobile view padding is 16 pixels. So it's actually half what the desktop one is. But for now, set it as 32 left and right. And that will be essentially the layout of this group. And what we're going to do is we're going to also have horizontal alignment, and we're going to go to center. So now the group will be lined up in the center with the padding there, as you can see. And one thing we also need to do, which I forgot to mention earlier, is actually put a max width of 1200. This is because we want it a little bit smaller than what we're designing in, because 1200 is the actual screen size standard. So if we were to go, for example, to responsive, you will see that our desktop standard is 1200. So that is how it would look. So we want to put that padding a little bit on the sides of those, which is the 32 padding that we've already put. So we're going to make sure that the max width, it does not go more than 1200 pixels. So let's go back to UI Builder. Now, what we want to do is start to insert our elements inside of this group that we've just set up. So the first thing we want to do is essentially put in an image. A navbar will usually have the logo of the business or the brand name. So we're going to put in the image and the text for that business or brand name, whatever you are going to obviously design that to be. So I'm just going to click on image. I'm just going to drop that in here, and I'm just going to upload an image here. I've just got one here, which is the No Code Creators image. Now, speaking of No Code Creators, just wanted to let you all know that I've recently started a new school community called No Code Creators, which is that image that you just saw in the video. I want to build a community full of no code creators who are aspiring to build businesses around the no code skills that you develop and learn. And I want to start to teach how to actually turn that into a business. So I want to try and grow the community as much as possible. So if you are enjoying this type of content, there will be a lot more inside the school community. I will put the link in the description below. So I'd really appreciate if you do want to sign up to that community. It is completely free. So I'd really appreciate if you can join that group, and we can, start to learn together, start to build our no code experiences and knowledge together. And then we can also share ideas of how to turn things into a business, share success stories and things like that. So if that does sound like something you'd be interested in, click the link in the description below and join the school community, and let's become no code creators together. All right, so the first thing we want to do is actually resize this image, of course. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this to just 50, just for now. We're going to make sure you keep element aspect ratio fixed, which will essentially keep it as, as the actual size of the image. And what we're going to do is we're just going to make it 1 times 1, which will keep it as obviously even outline. And back to appearance. This is obviously a purely design, preference. I like to make the roundness at 100 because it makes it a complete full circle. And that way, of course, it would look a little bit nicer in the nav bar. But again, if your logo does not suit to be a circle, you can obviously not make any roundness. I just like to do it personally. Okay, one thing to make note is mine was actually outside of the group. So you can see here, I had the group that we just set up, and the image was actually dropped on the navbar floating group. So what you want to do, this is actually a good lesson for you guys, is make sure you drop your elements inside the actual group that you've set, not on the outer part. So I'm just going to drag that into here, and you can see now it's realigned back into the group that we set up just before. So I'm going to make sure this is centered in the center for the vertical alignment, so it's in the center of the actual group. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to drop, so you click on the text element and make sure you drop that just right next to the logo. You can rearrange it to the other side if you want. And I'm just going to call it the name of the school community that I've started, which is No Code Creators. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to obviously change the style of this. This is, again, personal preference, but you do want this to be, obviously, a good, nice size. So I'd like to make it something like maybe a heading 6, which is obviously a little bit more bold, about 700 bold level. And you can change, obviously, the size of the text. What we want to do as well is we want to make sure we select center the text vertically. And that way, you just make sure it's in the center of this group. And then if you go back to layout, we want to make sure that's also centered vertical alignment, so it can be right in the same centered layout as the logo itself. Now, what you want to do for this text is actually untick fixed width, remove min width, and then you want to also remove min height. And what we're going to do now is actually click fit width to content, which what that's going to do is it's actually going to wrap around the whole text. And the good thing about this is if I was to add text as I'm going, so for example, you can see here that the actual width will adjust according to how much content you've got in there. That's why fit width to content is good, specifically for like shorter text, because that way it will just, it will keep it as a snug fit and kind of keep the border just directly around the text and not anything more. You don't want to take up more space than you already have, especially if it's something that's obviously a smaller amount of text or a smaller element. Fit width to content is really good for that. Now, this obviously is looking okay, but you can see they are way too close to each other. So what you want to do this is when designing a navbar and as well as designing anything else on your page in Bubble or any other, kind of designing type of applications. You want to group like elements together. So yes, we already have a group in here, but you want to go another step further and group like elements together within the group. So what I'm going to do is click on that, hold shift and click on the logo as well. And then we're going to right click, and you can see here we're going to group elements in, and we're going to do that row container because again we want them side by side. We don't want them on top of each other. We want to make sure they stay side by side, which will be a row container. And you can see here now it's created a whole nother wrap. And then again, what we're going to do is we're going to, similar to what we just did before, is fit width to content, and that will just wrap around only the content that's within the group. Now, of course, that's too close together, which is why we wanted to group them in the first place. And in the Layout tab, you want to go to Apply Gap Spacing Between Elements. Once I check that, this is where you can actually change the amount of pixels that are between the elements within the group that you've now selected. So I'm going to do probably 12. That's probably a bit too much. Let's click back into that, and I'd say maybe 8. Yeah, 8 looks a bit better. So that's how you would create a bit of a gap between elements that are kind of stuck together, group them, and then create the space in between. Now, what you also want to do is name these groups, however you can, remember them and keep them as, keep your workflow as efficient as possible. So I'm just going to name this group brand, because that way I know that that's for the brand name and logo. This for the group A, we can just call this group container because this is where everything is going to be inside of with all the elements. So now we've got group container, and then inside that we've got group brand, which is obviously just the logo and the name of the business. So after we've now done the title and the logo, what we want to include in a navbar, which obviously is quite common, is including links. So text with that are actual nav links. So obviously for people to select to go to a certain area on the web page or on the website to another page. So we're going to click on link, and we're going to just drop that into here. Now you can see it's just gone there. We'll readjust this in a second. So we're going to call this one home. And then what we're going to do for appearance is we're just going to change it to make it a little bit bigger. So let's say 16 text, and we're going to make it darker. So I've got just a pre-made one here, which is just this is the code if you want to make it exactly the same. I've just called it a neutral 900. We're going to make it a little bit more bold as well. So let's make it maybe 500. And we can keep everything else as it is. Now for layout, you can just go to next. So you can either drag it manually or you can just click on next like I just did. And that will take it to obviously the next section or the next position in the group itself. So again, we want to make sure this is centered vertically. So it can be obviously in line with everything else. And again, we want to uncheck, make it a fixed width, remove min width and fit width to content. So that's again wrapped around only the text within that link element. Now what you also want to do is in the appearance tab, you can see here link destination. Now for me, I'm just going to keep it as the index page. So the destination page is just going to stay there. Obviously, if you've created already a lot of different pages, you can obviously put it exactly to where you want it. But just for this tutorial purpose, I'm just going to keep it as index page for all of the links that we're going to include. But obviously you can change it according to what page you actually want to send your users to. So now that we've set this one up, instead of having to do it, another 2 times if we want 3 nav links inside, we can just duplicate this. So you can either do, Command C, Command V, or you can just, Command D for duplicate. And you can see here, we've got the exact same layout. It's, fit width to content, so it's wrapped around nice and snug as well. But instead, we're just going to change this one to, let's say, pricing. So there's going to be a pricing link as well. And again, we don't have to, change anything. You just click on it again and duplicate. And let's say this one could be the about link, or if you want to have it anything else, you can. Now, that's fine. Now we've got 3. What we also want to change in the group, in the main group container, in the layout, instead of keeping it aligned like this, which is all to the left side, we want to actually do space between. What that's going to do is it's actually going to separate them a little bit more to look like a little bit more like a navbar that is traditionally the way that it traditionally looks. So of course now this doesn't look visually appealing in terms of the spacing between all 3 of these links. So what we're going to do, similar to what we did with these 2, we're going to group them, because again, like I said, these are like elements. And with like elements, you want to obviously continuously group them together so you can design them accordingly, similar, apply the gap space between each other, things like that. So I'm going to click on Home, Shift, Pricing, Shift, About, right click, and we're going to also group this in a row container. You can see now that's obviously joined together. We're going to do the same thing as we did before with the layout. So we're going to go to fit width to content, and you can see that's now wrapped around the whole thing with no extra space needed. And we're going to change the group name to group nav links. Again, you can name this whatever you want as long as it's something that you can remember and make it easier for your workflow. So apply gap spacing between elements. Again, we want to make sure we do that so we can put a nice gap between each other and not obviously have them stuck like this. So we're going to go 24 pixels is pretty good. Yeah, that'll be fine. And then what we're going to now do, one other thing we want to add to the navigation bar is a button. So, navigation bars, we usually have 1 or 2 buttons, usually 2, especially if it's like signing up to something, because you'll have a sign up button and you'll have a login button. So we want to add 2 of those and put them into the nav bar as well. So let's click on button and you can just click onto here. Again, we'll readjust, the positioning in a second. So for the first one, we're going to go sign up. And what we're going to do is we're going to, leave it as, you can set it whatever color you would like. And again, you can decide on what type of appearance you would like to have for these buttons. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to make it a little bit more round. I usually like to make it around 8. And then what I'm also going to do for the layout, and you should do this as well, is like we did before, remove the fixed width and min width and fit width to content. So there you go, that's how the button will look. Now in terms of padding, obviously you can do this depending on what you prefer, but a good design standard is to have 0 top and bottom, 20 left and right, not 200, sorry. 20 left and right usually looks pretty good. Yeah, I like the look of that. I think that size is good. Again, this is preference, but it's good to have like a good design system and standard to kind of go by consistently, so you're not always having to just guess what sizes to do. So 0, 0 top and bottom, 20 and 20 left and right. So that's how the sign up button will look. Yeah, that's pretty good. So for layout, again, we're going to center it vertically. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to double click on layout. We're going to make last. So now what that's done is it's shifted that completely to the right hand side, and you've got your nav links now directly in the center. Why has that happened? Because inside of this group, we put that space between alignment, which has now made sure that there's left, right, and centered elements, as obviously it's going to stay consistent with that specific container alignment. So that's why this is really good to do it for navigation bars. Now that you've got that button here and you've set the appearance and layout that you want, instead of having to redo it manually, like I said before, all we do is just duplicate it. And we're going to make this one a login. So obviously if someone's already got an account, we'll just give them a login button instead. And now this one, usually it's nicer to make it a different color to the sign up one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the text to the dark, neutral 900, which is essentially like almost a black, a very, very dark gray. And then the color, we're going to change that to just plain white. And then we're going to add a border, make that just a solid border. You can do the roundness as 8, like we did with the other button. And I'm going to change this one to a neutral 200, which is this code here. So if you want to copy that, you can. And then you can change this obviously according to what you would like. This is the one that I'm going to use. So if you want to copy that code as well, you can. Now, yeah, that's fine. So we've got the sign up and login. Now, obviously we want these closer together. So same thing as we did with this and these two is we're going to group the two buttons together. So we're going to shift, hold, and then right click, group elements in row container. And again, we're going to make sure in the layout tab, we have fit width to content. So again, that's now nice and snug. And we're going to go to apply gap spacing between elements. So let's click on that. We're going to do a space of, let's try 12. Yeah, I think that will be good. Yeah, 12 looks nice. Okay, great. So let's just have a quick look to see how this looks now on a page. So now that we've done this, we can just go back into our index page. So the home page essentially. Now on the left hand side here, you can see that in reusable elements, you should now have your navbar. So if you just click on that and just drop it in, beautiful. That's how it's going to look now. Yeah, and if we go to preview, you'll be able to see exactly the way it looks. Yeah, I like the look of that. So you can see here, we've got obviously the logo and the name. You've got the links, home, pricing, and about, or whatever you've set them to. And you've got your two buttons. So I really like the look of that. So let's go back into our editor. We'll go back into Navbar so we can edit that. All right, so now if we go into responsive, we want to obviously see how this will look on different page sizes. So 1200, yes, obviously that's going to look really good. 992, yeah, it's okay. 768, it's getting a little bit tight now. So you can see if I start to drop this, it's going to get a bit too squashy. So we're going to have to actually change this navbar to adjust when screen sizes start to get smaller than let's say 768, because as I drop a little bit less, it's going to start to get too tight with the content that's in there. So we're going to have to set a rule for this to change. So let's go back into our builder. What we want to do first is select the group nav links that you've now set together. Double click on that. In conditional, this is where you set certain conditions that essentially tell Bubble that you want this behavior to change based on certain conditions. So we're going to go define another condition. When search up page, and you can see current page width is less than, and we're going to just put in 768, which is the pixel size that we just saw in the responsive, and you can see it's already got it ready here for us. So when current page width is less than the mobile landscape standard of 768 pixels, then it's going to ask, what do you want to do with that when it does hit that actual condition? You're going to hit this drop down and then go, this element is visible. And you're actually going to uncheck this. And what you're doing there is you're telling Bubble that this element is not visible because you've obviously unchecked it. So whenever the current page width gets less than 768, we do not want to show this group here. All right, so that's what you want to set on this one. Now what you can do, instead of doing the same thing on the buttons, just right click and go copy expression. Now we're going to hit the group buttons. Oh, I forgot to name this actually. So name it group buttons so that way you know. And we're going to go define another condition. Right click, paste expression. So now you've got the exact same thing. This element is visible, uncheck. Now one thing you also need to do in the layout tab is hit collapse when hidden. So that way you're telling Bubble that when it's actually going to be hidden, which is essentially under the 768 pixel, you want that spacing to close. You don't want it to just be a blank open space. So collapse when hidden on that one. Same thing for this one, collapse when hidden. Okay, great. So now that you've done that, what you want to do now is you want to obviously put something in place of these. So whenever the screen size does get less than 768 pixels, you want to obviously, yes, you want to collapse those and not show them, but you want something to show up instead. So what we want to do is go to the icons. So if you go into install more and just in the plugins, go to material icon. This one here, the Google material icon, just install that one and just hit done. You want to get an icon from that one. So you can see here, material icon. You can just drop it in here. Again, it doesn't matter. We are going to change this. Now for layout, all icons should always be 24 pixels. So what we're going to do is 24 by 24. Okay. Now on the appearance, on the layout tab, sorry, you want to make sure you uncheck this element is visible on page load, because essentially we don't want this to show when the page is loading normally on a laptop or on a desktop size. We want to only show it on a conditional position, which is obviously going to be the reverse of what we've set these to. So uncheck this element is visible on page load. So make sure that it doesn't come up. So obviously you can see here it's going to disappear, but you can still change the element and obviously set your specific settings for it. So once we've done that, we want to make sure we center this vertically as well. Okay, great. And we're going to make this last. So we're going to put this towards right here after the buttons. Okay, one thing I forgot to mention is we have to change the icon. Obviously we don't want this smiley face. Just select, type in menu, and you can see it's just going to be this little hamburger icon menu here. So we're going to select that one, and now you can see that that's going to be obviously what shows up. But again, we're going to collapse this when hidden, so that way, obviously when it's not showing, if it is on a bigger screen size, we want to make sure that it doesn't take up any space. So we'll do that in a second, but first we want to set the condition. So define another condition, right click, you can paste the same expression when current page width is less than 768 pixels. This time we're going to do the reverse. So we're going to do this element is visible and leave it checked. Because now what we're saying is when it does get smaller than 768, we actually want to show this, and then obviously we're going to make sure to not show these ones. So you can see these two are unchecked, and then the material icon is checked. So now back to the layout tab, you can collapse when hidden to make sure it doesn't show up on any desktop view or anything above 768 pixels. And now what you want to do, now that we've set all the conditions that we want to make sure are set in place for the adjusted screen sizes, go to the responsive tab in Bubble, and then you can see, okay, 1200, yep, still looks fine, 992, still good, 768, it's still showing the same. And then what we're going to do is just drop it. There we go. You can see here that the icon has showed up, and then the other elements, the nav links and the buttons, have now disappeared, because obviously we want to fit them all into this icon once we select the icon. So that's how you can test to make sure the rules are applied correctly, the conditions that we set. So you can see here above 768, yep, it's fine, below. And you can see that just changes consistently. So that way, depending on what screen size your web app is going to be viewed on, you now have a responsive design for your navbar. So guys, you can see that creating a nice and simple responsive navbar is actually pretty straightforward in Bubble, as long as you put the right elements inside the groups, and then making sure that similar elements are grouped together to then obviously set certain conditions and rules in place for them to have different design standards, and then obviously change the layout according to the certain screen sizes as I showed in the tutorial. So that's how you can design a really cool interactive navbar, and you can use this no matter what type of web app or website or landing page that you're designing, whether it be in Bubble or another platform. You can utilize these same similar design rules and structures to really make sure that you can get a nice looking navbar for what you're designing. Again guys, as I mentioned earlier in the video, I have started a brand new school community called No Code Creators. I just want to bring together as many no code creators as possible, share ideas, share business ideas especially, so we can teach each other how to turn our no code skills into a business, and share each other's success stories and learn from one another. So I'd really appreciate if you can join the school community. I have put the link in the description below. And if you are someone who's interested in no code and you'd like to find out a little bit more about no code tools, specifically ones that I feel like you need to know this year, check out this video here. Thank you for watching. Take care.